All amendment to S5, it's draft 3.1, dated 2/14/2023, 8:32 p.m. It's posted on the committee's website today under my name. Changes from the prior draft are in yellow. They came partially from, so last Friday I was here, we were working on 2.1. We didn't actually get to the end of the bill, so there's a couple of very small things at the end that I left highlighted just so that you are aware that they were there.
Yes, please.
This copy seems to be missing page 4. Oh, wait, no.
Oh, I have page 4.
Oh,
Tony was having problems with the.
actually, it's actually missing every even page. I have no page 2 or page 6.
Then I went down, he was. I do have them, so.
Do you have the odd pages?
I do, I have 1, 2. Should we project it or should I go get copies? It's
If you,
probably the copies,
yeah,
but
maybe in the short.
I'm happy, I'll look online if you want to use that one.
I would love to have a hard copy.
So, Jude, I'll look online for now, so no rush, I'm cool with that, but a hard copy eventually.
Yeah, this copy is. Anyway,
Yeah, I have no even number page.
even though you can number of pages.
Oh, okay, well, that's a problem, so I'll have Tony do it again.
Let's
drag up the rain.
No, one page.
Do you have the correct pages?
I do not. I have odd numbers.
Tony and I are tight.
I wondered why it felt so slim.
Well, yes, it's actually more pages than the prior version, so it shouldn't feel like a small document.
Sorry, so a little hiccup here. Does Tony have the document still?
No, I have, well, who knows? I mean,
Okay.
I'm gonna send it to him again. I mean, I'm happy to take it and photocopy it. Why don't I do that? I think it's gonna be faster.
Is that true? Actually, is did I just get to use the correct copy?
The highlighted one should be the correct one. This is really great.
Recycle
Oh,
before
this
I
is-
confused.
There's
Yeah,
actually
this is-
plenty
this is
for
the
us to
right
talk
copy.
about in the meantime, if we want to just
The
talk.
screen is good.
So yeah, let's, while
Well,
we,
if you want the screen.
Oh, poor you.
I'm coming or going, I don't know. Be right
I
back.
can do this electronic.
Takes the time on the first copy.
8:32 p.m.
You have before dinner or after?
yours is too skinny. It's half the page.
I eat when I can.
It's too skinny, it's only half the page. But we'll get to more. Okay, so let's start with, can you display from your, no, we're not
No.
set up that way. So that's all right, let's
No,
just
but
start.
maybe I'll just talk a minute more about where
Where-
these changes came from.
Sure.
Because I think this committee has a lot of decisions to make. So yesterday, you heard from the PUC. They presented a number of changes that I think were significant to the bill. And so the draft that you will have in front of you in a minute, draft 3.1, has some changes that you made as a committee on Friday when I was here. And then the chair requested that some of the language from the PUC be added to this draft. However, it doesn't include all of it, particularly around how they propose structuring the default delivery agent and the credit market. So not all of the changes that the PUC proposed yesterday were included in this draft because they were fairly significant departures. However, I do think we can discuss them today and you can consider if you want to add in all of them. The sections at the end of the bill related to public engagement that the PUC walked through yesterday are included in this draft. We still can talk through them. The other thing that's in here is yesterday, I think you heard the chair ask the general counsel of the PUC about the definition of obligated party. So there is a new proposal in here for the definition of obligated party. I hope that it is clear. It, however, does use some different terms than we haven't used in the prior draft, so it is also going to be a little bit of a different structure, but I hope that it is the most clear version we've had since. so that it's very easy to understand who we're talking about. But I think we also should probably discuss that. So,
I'll just add, so I've been, as we've been working, I've been collecting comments, questions from the committees, flagging stuff, as you can see. And so I think most all these flags have been addressed in this. They're all things we talked about. Sometimes we actually edited the thing and said, here's what we want to say. Other times it was like, how are we going to address that? So wherever I've gone ahead and worked with council to answer how we can address that, right, it's flagged. But my goal was to keep on making progress and then review it as a committee. And as council said, the biggest question of all is used his proposal in terms of running the program. And based on informal conversations with committee members, after we adjourned, I had the impression that, well, one, we definitely needed to talk through it as a committee, and two, I think people had concerns about the magnitude and scope of the change. Like to remove, for instance, tradable credits would have a significant impact on the marketplace. And having a sort of a stricter definition of a single default delivery agent would also have a significant impact. And from my point of view, one of the things we've been trying to facilitate is that there'll be an active marketplace. The active marketplace means people offer different. The marketplace will bring competitive pressures to bear so that we'll see innovation and hopefully keep costs down. So that's that until we have hard copy.
oh, I would also just add that this draft has not been edited as it was written 12 hours ago.
Okay, very
So we-
fresh work.
And the typos, I went through it again this morning, but things happen.
Understood. Time of year, keeping moving is the final, whatever, the final editorial. For this. Probably limited time. It's good that we keep working. The other thing is, I know that I have said to folks, if you had edits you'd like to see, please talk to council. So I figured after we go through this, depending on what time remains, that well, then let's revisit the suggestions or questions or concerns that members of the committee have had. As well as the big question, which is where are we landing on the usage proposal? Look at this, see. Through that door, any second.
So there are no changes to section 1 or section 2. Section 1 is the short title. Section 2 is the finding section. When we get there, the first change is on section 3, and it's a small change to the phrasing in the intent section that you all were looking at last week.
We are temporarily staying. Something else we can do for 1 or 2 minutes.
I was just going to say, I have to leave at 10:50 for about 15 minutes. It's recovery day.
Amongst the changes that we received as a committee that are here.
Listen, Matt. Thank you so much, Jude. Sorry about that.
Little hiccup.
It looks like all the page.
I hope all of it.
Thank you. It feels the right thickness.
Thank you.
Did everybody get a copy?
I think Senator McDonald needs one. He has the abridged version still. Here, I'll take this one so you don't have to.
Yeah.
That one will. It's warm. It's
All right.
warm and twice as thick. Okay, here we go. Thank you, council.
I don't think that's ever happened to Tony before.
Okay. Usually he's spot on.
So the first change is on page 3. And section, so section 3, starting on page 3, is the statutory provisions, adding the new chapter to Title 30 on the Clean Heat Standard. So the first section, 8121, is the intent section. So there's new language on line 9. It reads, it shall enhance social equity by prioritizing customers with low income and moderate income and those households with the highest energy burdens.
That was sort of an annoying thing that I'm not sure, it's been around for a long time, but minimizing is sort of the least positive way that we could talk about what the real goal is enhancing social equity. Alrighty, onward. And you know what, so I'm just procedurally, I'm gonna, unless someone flags something for more discussion or anything, I'm gonna put a check mark like we're agreeing as a committee. If there's an issue, please pull us over and don't be shy.
Okay, so on page 4, so section 8122 currently lays out the primary elements of the Clean Heat Standard. And so the language on page 4 is what was proposed yesterday by the PUC. And this is the language that is large, well, the language on the next page relates largely to the language that's currently in statute regarding efficiency Vermont. So it struck the language that a party can meet their requirement in these different ways. This is shifting it to the sort of default delivery agent.
So in the comments from the PUC, this section is like as being changed because there's no need for a tradable clean heat credits. So, and I think that was something that we were not gonna do. So wondering about the need to change the section.
So why don't we, yes, I agree. So how about, let's look at what's inserted and then double back to that conversation.
Okay, so page 4, starting on line 5. In place of obligated party-specific programs, the commission shall provide for the development and implementation of statewide clean heat programs and measures by one or more default delivery agents appointed by the commission for these purposes. The commission may specify that appointment of a default delivery agent to deliver clean heat services on behalf of obligated parties who pay the per credit fee to the default delivery agent satisfies those entities' obligations under this section. The commission by rule or order shall establish a process by which an obligated party may apply to the commission to self-administer clean heat programs or measures. The commission and its rules or order shall establish criteria for approving these applications, for approval of these applications. The commission by rule or order shall establish a process by which an obligated party may apply to the commission to self-administer clean heat programs or measures. The commission and its rules or order shall establish criteria for approval of these applications. Appointed default delivery agent supervision. Any entity appointed by order of appointment under subdivision C of this section that is not an electric or gas utility already regulated in this title shall not be considered to be a company as defined in section 201 of this title, but shall be subject to the provisions of sections 18 through 21, 30 through 32, 205 to 208, subsection 209A, sections 219, 221, and subsection 231 of fee of this title to the same extent as a company as defined under 201 of this title. The commission and the Department of Public Service shall have jurisdiction under those sections over the utility, its directors, receivers, trustees, lessees, or other persons or companies owning or operating the entity, and of all plants, equipment, and property that the entity used in or about the business carried on by it in the state as covered and included in this section. This jurisdiction shall be exercised by the department so far as may be necessary to enable them to perform the duties and exercise the power conferred upon them by law. The commission and the department may each, when they deem the public good requires, examine the plants, equipment, property, and on the entity appointed by order of appointment to serve as the default delivery agent. So I think there are actually two things happening here, which you do have policy, like these are policy decisions. So first on page 4, this is establishing the default delivery agent as the default process and allowing obligated parties to opt out of that process if they want to do clean heat measures themselves. So what the process would look like is that everyone would be, all obligated parties would be required to go to the default delivery agent and pay the per credit price for clean heat measures based on their obligation. However, if they're a company that already does install clean heat measures, or if they have a plan that they think that this would be that's something they would like to do, they can apply to the PUC to then opt out of the default delivery agent. And then towards the bottom of page 4 and into page 5, these are the sections that actually change the default delivery agent from what was in the prior drafts, a market participant that would be selected by the PUC to be an entity that would be wholly regulated by the PUC, like one of the public service companies under Title 30, like Efficiency Vermont is currently. So there are two things happening here. So if you have, I mean, there are a number of choices you could make here. I think you could alter the PUC's proposal further if you are looking to only adopt parts of it.
So to get the ball rolling, we've seen the level of sort of management by the PUC shift back and forth to different proposals, and to me, I have the concern that by eliminating the tradable aspects of tradable credits and a more open marketplace, that it will not support as much innovation and may result in higher costs. So that's that's just my sort of starting point for looking at this proposal. I don't know, so let's pause and say, for folks who have thought about this, where are you landing? And I'd like to say one other thing, that the working group that's been involved in this since 2020 has reviewed the PUC's draft, and I talked with them about bringing back a response to that. So we will have other language to look at, another perspective on how it could be managed. We don't have that in front of us yet. Okay, so Senator Watson.
Well, it's good to know. So folks are aware, I will just say I'm interested in the idea of a DDA as opt out, but not as eliminating the triple credits aspect. And I'll be interested in the new language. So that's all.
Senator McCormick?
Yeah, I'm having trouble getting into the details because I'm still troubled by the basic idea of the tradable credits. First of all, whenever I say this is cap and trade, the witness, it's not cap and trade. Okay, it doesn't have a cap.
It's not.
It doesn't have a cap.
And it's not.
It's cap and trade without the cap.
Well, it's not really. It's not.
All right.
So it's and trade requires sale, right? So in the cap and trade system, yes, there is trading that happens. There may also be sale, but this is the creation. It's more like RECs. Like if you're thinking about the renewable energy market, like the RECs are tradable. They can be bought and sold or traded.
What do you get if you buy it?
Credit under this bill,
What do you get for having the credit?
complying with the law.
Of course. But the law is that you have to get credits.
Yes.
The reason you need credits is that if you're a seller of fossil fuels, depending on the amount you've sold, you have an obligation. And that obligation is measured in how many credits you need to acquire and retire. That offsets the impact of the fuel you've sold.
And you buy the credits, the original credits are bought from Rome.
Well, part of what we're doing is sorting out how credits could be created and administered in the system. But I'll have to go back to council.
Whoever does work to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So credits represent a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions.
You do something, it's up to you what you do.
Yes.
You do something to reduce emissions and then you get credits.
Yes.
And what do the credits do for you?
Who's the you in that sentence? So if you're a contractor,
Whoever the person is who's getting the credits.
well,
The
so
company,
there's an obligation to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and in this bill, it's currently put on someone who brings fuel into the state of Vermont. Anyone can create credits by doing work to reduce emissions, but because this obligation has been put on the fuel, the obligated parties, the people who sell fuel, they can purchase those credits or generate it themselves. So they can either reduce their greenhouse gas emissions themselves and earn their credits, or they can purchase them from someone like a contractor who's installing heat pumps or doing weatherization work, who's done work to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and therefore gained credits.
okay, I buy my fuel in New Hampshire, I sell it in Vermont, so I'm bringing it into the state, so I'm subject to this requirement.
Are you a fuel dealer? Is that what you're saying? When you say I buy, are you taking the role of a fuel dealer here? I'm just.
I'm developing a hypothetical, let's say for this, yes, I'm a fuel dealer.
Okay.
The questions that's asked is, why are credits, what does it do for you, right?
Yeah, let's go a little further, I'm
It
gonna
allows
say to
you to
myself,
sell a pollutant that will go into the sky.
in a perfect world, I would have no additional atmospheric carbon. I'm with you in theory, but my customers have no money and they're gonna be cold if I don't give them the fossil fuels I'm selling. And so I'm not gonna do this.
So
What happens to me?
that's a hard.
You don't
business.
sell any fuel?
It's a hard business to run. Your customers have no money and you can't deliver fuel.
Well, no, they have enough money barely to continue to buy what I'm selling them, but you want them to convert, and they don't have the money for that, so I'm gonna
Convert
keep
what?
selling them dirty fuel.
What's the conversion that you want them to convert? Sorry.
No, whatever, we talk, whatever it is they do to have less atmosphere.
It's the chicken and the egg movement. If you want to sell fuel, you've got to pay for activities that reduce the amount of fuel that people that you sell to in total aggregate need to heat their homes. And it allows you to continue to sell that polluting fuel. And the reason you're allowed to continue doing it is that you have made incremental reductions, participated in making incremental reductions to the amount of fuel everybody needs to heat their homes.
Yes, I agree. And I would also add that you're not necessarily obligated to sell these reductions to your specific customers. That's why anyone in Vermont can generate credits. So you can purchase credits from someone else who has reduced greenhouse gas emissions that isn't specifically one of your customers.
Anybody who reduces carbon gets credits.
Mhm.
Okay, and again, what do the credits do for you?
Allow you to sell a pollutant fuel.
and say that you have reduced greenhouse gas emissions, which is something that this bill requires. You can then sell them potentially to a fuel dealer, so it's putting a value on this action that you want to incentivize.
And I think the action we want to incentivize is a reduction in the emission of greenhouse gases for people for heating homes and businesses.
It's not going to get us one. This committee is doing work and I'm getting in the way of it now. I'll shut up. I read it, expressed my concerns.
But
I'll be that much of a team player. all right?
we'll make time to make sure that any questions you have get answered, so. They say, those things are not a good question.
I mean, I guess if it does help to think about a cap and trade system, you could, but this isn't like a traditional cap and trade system. So it has some similarities in that there is going to be a reduction of the amount of greenhouse gas emissions, but it's not like other existing cap and trade systems because of the diversity of options in it.
And it's actually better than a cap and trade system. Like this is, so I think what we should also express is that this is bringing along the folks who are going to be a part of the transition. So what we're experiencing right now in the status quo is a reduction in fossil fuels will happen either by disaster or by design. And what we're doing in this bill is helping folks move and transition away from fossil fuels using the folks who have traditionally been providing them heat and comfort, like the fuel dealers, like the wholesalers. So it's making them a part of the solution in a way that a cap and trade system might not, or a, even in the proposal we heard from the administration with their study, where they're going to be looking into maybe even a carbon tax as an alternative. This is different than all of those strategies because it actually incorporates the people who would be doing the work into being a part of the incentivized measures that can happen. So they will be able to, and this is kind of the change we're talking about, is are they either going to automatically have a designated delivery agent like an efficiency utility, where they can then, in this new language, opt out if they don't feel that they want to use that service and then do it themselves and develop those clean heat credits, or they just default into having this efficiency utility or whoever be able to generate the credits for them on their behalf. So an example in our district, like how I see this playing out for an individual person, let's use myself as an example, is I personally use propane. We have weatherized our home. We'd love to switch to a heat pump. I could see our fuel dealer either choosing to go and have a designated delivery agent be getting credits for them on their behalf, or my ideal situation is they are a heat pump installer now, or they're someone who does additional weatherization. So then they're incentivized to help me as an individual reduce my propane use, and they get incentivized themselves, I get incentivized myself, and then I'm lowering my usage, saving money, and they're also meeting their requirements.
So this change in the manner in which the PUC would operate, my suggestion is that we put it, flag it, and park it to the side for a moment so we can continue to walk through, so that we can then also see alternative language that keeps, I would say, many of the process steps that the PUC brought forward yesterday, but restores the design of a tradable system.
Right, and so I just want to like go back to what I started with, which is I do think there are like two distinct choices here. The first is, do you want it to be a default delivery agent where you have to opt out of using a default delivery agent? And the second choice is, do you want it to be a wholly regulated company that's operating as a default delivery agent, not sort of the market participant we have been discussing in prior weeks.
Thank you for distilling out the question. So let's continue.
Also, I think there's a typo on page 4, so I'm gonna fix it, but nobody can look at it right now, but if anyone wants to email me later, I've already seen it. So the next change is on page 7. So now we're in the definition section. So 2 new definitions have been added. On page 7, there are new definitions. First, customer with low income means a customer with a household income of up to 60% of area median income as published annually by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And customer with moderate income means a customer with a household income between 60% and 120% of area median income as published annually by HUD.
So we had talked about, Senator McDonald, you expressed some interest in having us define these terms rather than having the PUC do it. And then we also had Ms. Collins and Ms. Byer speaking to the same point. So from Ms. Collins' recent email, we pulled the language that's before you right here. Does anyone have any more thoughts on that? Sir, no?
We're instead of having the PUC do it, we're having the Department of Housing and Urban Development do it.
No, I mean, the data that gets referred to, AMI gets calculated annually by HUD, but we're specifying based on those values.
And who establishes those values?
The HUD values,
Well, who writes down on paper the values that this refers to?
so yes,
The US Congress?
you know, I don't know the precise method by which this is a standard metric used around the country, so we can learn more about it. But it's a published. They do a census and then they publish. I think at the county level, people find it at metropolitan district level.
Census blocks or whatever method say.
You know, I'm not gonna outdrive my headlights on this one. We'll find out exactly.
But it's not us.
Well, there are different censuses out there that you could use. There's federal poverty level, FPL was the other one we heard of, and AMI was another alternative way of analyzing income for an area. But the state doesn't usually relies on a data set, and in this case, it's from HUD.
I'm not arguing.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, so council, you might have more to offer.
Which would be different from every year we set the yield on how our state aid works. We don't reference it to someone else. We state the yield and know the consequences of the yield we set. So it's taking a mathematical procedure off the shelf that operates at the federal level under the control of Congress. It's certainly not an arbitrary one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to understand the mechanism rather than whether it's good or bad.
Okay.
Right, and so while you are tying it to a federally established number, the brackets around that number are within your policy discretion. So in number 5, for low income, it's 60% of that number. And then for moderate income, it's between 60 and 120. Those are numbers you can choose to adjust as well.
Right, so I think, thanks for reminding me. So the question had been, regardless of the data set, that how did we use that data to define low moderate. And before, we were leaving to the PUC to make the decision.
This is how we would do it.
And now we're saying, this is how we're, for our purposes, we're defining low as described here and moderate as described here.
Okay. So the next change is also on page 7. It's in,
Well, sorry, I'm gonna do my editorial check.
oh,
here.
sure.
Are people, other than getting more information, Senator McDonald, are people agreeable to this amendment?
It holds water. It's not arbitrary. It hasn't been assigned to PUC. It's been assigned to something greater than the PUC, which may be more or less fallible. We'll find out before we go down.
So,
Thank you, Chairman Bray. I appreciated the elegance of the previous solution, which was to request that the Public Utilities Commission define it, because I think they're going to be meshing together a whole host of different programs that have different income thresholds as a part of how they give and deliver services. However, I totally respect what we've heard from individual advocates on this topic, and if it gives them a comfortability to have it called out, that I think is our best bet. So I think we've addressed an equity concern that we've heard from witnesses by making this change, and I do support it. And I hope that with this definition, we are not creating any inflexibility, and I don't think we've heard that from the PUC. So if that is all square, I'm all square on this language.
so, you know, here to revisit this with the PUC to make sure that they wouldn't anticipate a problem.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I have to check next to our work. Okay.
Well, so can I ask a follow-up question? So I guess the question then is, I do think there's language later about the PUC's ability to adjust the definition, and I struck it. So I guess the question is if you want the PUC to be able to adjust this definition themselves or not.
So I just made a remark here saying that if we're to go with this, should the PUC be charged with recommending to us changes? Should the PUC believe they might be in order? And that would, they think that this has gone awry or doesn't make sense, they can come to the legislature and say, you ought to change this for the following reasons. But that's probably, we're gonna wanna say that in several places in the bill, where we make decisions, we like that. With the annual report business.
That sounds like a good strategy.
Meanwhile, we have an underlying position that's clear and hasn't been heard.
Consider the needle threaded for the moment. Thank you. All right, so let's continue our walkthrough, please.
So on page 7. Down in the definition of default delivery agent, yesterday the PUC made a pitch to allow for multiple default delivery agents. So there's a very small change on line 16. So a default delivery agent means an entity designated by the commission to provide services that generally meet measures. So the question is, do you want to allow them to hire multiple?
If there wants to, I'd like to.
I appreciate the flexibility. They don't have to. That's fine.
Okay, anybody else? Thank you.
All right.
Obligated party, page 8.
Page 8, okay. So there's new language in the definition of obligated party for heating fuels that are not natural gas. So obligated party means a regulated natural gas utility serving customers in Vermont, or for other heating fuels, the entity that imports heating fuel for ultimate consumption within the state, or the entity that produces, refines, manufactures, or compounds heating fuel within the state for ultimate consumption within the state. For purposes of this section, the entity that imports heating fuel is the entity that has ownership title to the heating fuel at the time it is brought into the state, into Vermont. Okay, so this is different language than what you have been looking at previously. However, I do think this language is very clear. I think the testimony you've heard is that while you all have been using the phrases wholesaler and retailer, it does seem to be a little less clear because it seems that those entities do different types of transactions. So this is being very specific that whoever transports the state transports fuel into the state for ultimate consumption and who owns it at the time it comes into the state, they are obligated.
Zero ones.
Are we feeling confident that this does not run afoul of the Dormant Commerce Clause?
Yes.
I'm good, thank you.
If you'd like to hear from the lawyers you heard previously, I think that they have looked at this language, they work in this language, and they are comfortable with it. So this language is almost exactly like what is in the Vermont fuel tax. So it's very similar to that language. It is also very similar to the California and Oregon language. I was looking at it last night and I need to look at it again, but both of their programs use very similar language and that language has been upheld in court. So this, I feel fairly, as with all things in constitutional law, can never be entirely certain, but this is very neutral language, and it really is about the importation of fuel. It also, which I haven't given you too much background on yet, the language about the entity that produces fuel, again, is a very neutral phrase. This is different than what you have looked at before, but by covering whoever brings fuel into the state or whoever purchases fuel or produces fuel in the state, that's neutrally looking at anyone who is introducing fuel for sale into commerce in Vermont. So it's covering different sides of different transactions, but it's covering them neutrally.
So in essence, all transaction, all production gets covered, whether it's in state or out of state, same the same, even.
Yes.
Thank you. No other questions about that?
So producers, loggers,
So not loggers, we are talking about liquid fuel here. So there potentially right now aren't any producers in Vermont at the moment, because potentially this would involve fracking or refining. Compound could cover biofuel blending, and I need to look into that a little bit just to make sure, but I think there potentially isn't anyone doing this action at the moment, but there could be in the future.
so line 911, where 11 in a bucket there, heating fuel means, it doesn't mean coal, it doesn't mean wood chips.
So coal is on the list, wood chips are not on the list.
Coal's not liquid.
Oh, you're right, I'm sorry. But in the definition that I was just talking about, we're primarily talking about liquid fuel. But I guess coal would also probably be part of that. So you're right, I misspoke.
The wood chips are not, wood pellets are not.
No.
So let's, if anyone has a concern question, we can come back to it. Not being, let's put a check going.
Okay, on page 9, small change. This was from the PUC yesterday. Again, just sort of adding clarifying language to this section. I've tried to rewrite for clarity. So on page 9, line 15, the annual percentage reduction shall be the same for all obligated parties.
I like that, sure, okay.
Yeah, and it's- yeah. I think I was just trying to be too succinct in my language,
Right,
so I don't want it to be confusing.
Okay. Thank you.
Page 10. So on page 10, there's 2 new pieces of language in subsection 4. So the commission may temporarily, not to exceed 18 months, adjust the annual requirement for good cause after notice and opportunity for public process. So this was the discussion we had on Friday. Do you think it should be not to exceed a period of 18 months? Sorry, I just, well, so anyways, that was,
Just a judgment.
okay. So may temporarily, not to exceed 18 months. Sorry, the grammar is a little weird there for me, but I was trying to capture what you discussed on Friday.
So I think Senator Watson, you could brought that. Brings forward.
And so good cause includes shortage of clean heat credits, undue adverse impact on particular customers or demographic segments. The commission shall ensure that any downward adjustment does not materially affect the state's ability to comply with 10 VSA 578A 2 and 3.
Call that huge and complicated to try to catch up.
Okay. So then on to page 11, and I just want to check, what time am I going until?
No,
Okay. Thank you. So then on page 11, there's some new language in subdivision 3 that was proposed by the PUC related to the data from the tax department. So starting on line 9, the Department of Taxes shall annually provide to the commission a copy of the forms that were submitted by the entities that pay the fuel tax pursuant to 33 VSA 2503 to the commission. If any form contains a social security number, the Department of Taxes shall redact the information before submitting a copy of the form to the commission. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, including 33 VSA 2503 and any confidentiality provisions that would normally apply to tax forms, the fuel tax forms submitted pursuant to 2503 shall be public documents, and the commission shall make those documents publicly available. The Department of Taxes shall ensure that the fuel tax form required under 2503 must include a prominent notice explaining that pursuant to this section, the form will be provided to the Public Utility Commission and will be made publicly available. The Department of Taxes shall further ensure that the fuel tax form requires that each submitting entity list the exact amounts of gallons of each fuel type separated by fuel that was sold in Vermont, as well as a list of the exact amount of gallons of each fuel type separated by type that was purchased by the submitting entity and the name and location of the entity from which it was purchased.
I like this change, I think it's good. I would be interested in adding some clause that would require the Department of Taxes to initiate providing this data no later than September of this year.
So I think we can add that. I would also say that I think language has been proposed in the budget adjustment act that would require the forms be updated by July 1, 2023.
Okay. So July?
Yes, and when whatever cycle is after that, so that might be September.
Oh,
By cycle, do you mean quarter?
Yeah, is that what it
Well,
is?
so we heard that they update, that they collect this data monthly.
Oh, monthly.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
But, you know, July's good.
so I'm not saying that that is the ultimate language. There may be further discussion on it. However, it has been proposed.
So could you just look into how, if we're gonna cross-reference, if we're gonna ask for the same work to be done. If we could sync it up with that calendar, whatever change they're making. I mean, I don't know that you would like to specify that they start to send the data. What we've put in the Budget Adjustment Act requires tax to send data to the department and A&R, doesn't take care of the PUC.
Yes, but the second section is addressing the form.
Right.
And so that whenever this takes effect, hopefully the form language has already passed.
Okay, so can you look into the details of how those two?
Well, so that, I think those are the details, right? It doesn't. Yes, I will look. So I just think that it's a session law provision directing the tax to update their forms.
Okay.
But it doesn't specify how to update the form.
Yes, it does.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
So, yes.
So, I'm concerned on this page 11, lines 10 and 11 and 12. And my concern is someone who reading this for the first time, they would go, oh, the fuel tax, they have to pay a fuel tax according to 33, blah, 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 blah. And no one knows what those numbers mean except for people who are in the business. Is there a way that 3 that's in the bucket to make it clear that we're referring to a fuel tax that is in effect prior to the passage of this bill, and that is not being altered or changed? And we might suggest somehow that it's reporting that this bill is successful, that the tax will be raised less and less year after year. Because we're gonna, the public's gonna look at this and say, you said there was no taxes in that bill, and on this page, such and such and such and such, it says right there the tax that's collected, blah, 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 and they're trying to pull the wool over our eyes. So that's my concern. I can't imagine anyone would actually do such a thing, but should they do that, we should somehow have cut them off at the pass.
Do you want it to read entities that pay the existing fuel tax established?
Yeah, I had the tax imposed prior to the passage of this bill, but words to that effect.
I like that.
The existing tax in place since Adam and Eve.
There folks will call it a carbon tax.
Pardon?
There folks will call it a carbon tax anyway.
That some people call a climate tax. Even though it has been in place since before that was a discussion. Blah, 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 blah. And I don't go that far, but
So I'm gonna pause to put on the record again, that this is not a carbon tax, and there should be no confusion that it is one. We're referring to a list provided by the Department of Tax for an existing obligation, because the list has useful information. So I'm just gonna say that in case anyone gets confused, and we'll keep going. Thanks for
I
that
don't think we're
clarification.
confused, but there will be people who deliberately intend to confuse the public with that language. Language.
Thanks for flagging that. It'll be more clear. So I'm putting a mark there for the establish a river language that I'm using, and then we'll come back to something at the end of that section related to the timing, so that we know it goes into effect in a timely way.
Okay, so there are 2 more changes on page 12. Small change on line 11. The commission shall share complete registration information with ANR and DPS for purposes of updating the greenhouse gas emissions inventory and forecast. Previously, the word was conducting.
So watch.
Nope, just good.
And then the next change is in subsection 5. The commission shall maintain and update annually a list of registered entities on its website that contains the required registration information. And so the language has been struck that was exempting them from listing the heating fuel volumes. So I did reach out to the PUC last night to clarify that they are intending to make all data they collect public. And they confirmed that, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so on page 13, there's a couple of changes. So first, in early action credits, this first change is for, hopefully for clarity. So early action credits, beginning on January 1, 2023, clean heat measures that are installed and provide emission reductions are creditable. Language that was struck, read, and shall count towards the future clean heat credit requirements of an obligated party. As we've discussed earlier today, they can be generated by anyone and count towards anyone's credits requirements. So there was a concern this was slightly unclear. I can work on some additional language if you'd like to put some of this back. I'm just trying to make it more clear, but I don't think it's in making a substantive change.
So for now, I'll flag it as okay. If someone gives it on further consideration, if you have an interest, we'll come back to that. Okay, so let's continue on.
So on page 13, now we're going to talk about the equitable distribution of clean heat measures. So there's a couple changes here that were provided, that were proposed by Laura Collins. So the clean heat standard, starting on line 9, shall be designed and implemented to enhance social equity by prioritizing customers with low income, moderate income, those households with the highest energy burden, and renter households with tenant paid energy.
Thank you.
Additionally, and down in the next section, the design shall ensure all customers have an equitable opportunity to participate in and benefit from clean heat measures regardless of heating fuel use, income level, geographic location, residential building type, or home ownership status.
And residential building type refers to what?
Well, I think Maura's intent was to differentiate between a single family home and a multi-unit home. I had originally thought that that was in home ownership status. However, I think she was interested in more clarity.
I think also include multi-unit dwellings as well.
And then further down on this page still, so of the annual requirement, each obligated party shall retire at least 16% from customers with low income and 16% from customers with moderate income. For each of these groups, at least one half of these credits shall be from installed clean heat measures that require capital investments. And there's more language in that sentence, but I thought I'd stop there.
So that was just nailing down that in the two groups, half of measures for each group
Need to be installed.
installed. Okay.
All right. On page 14,
Before we go on to that,
Yes.
Sorry. Seems to me that a large company would have no trouble with these requirements. They simply hire someone to implement them and keep records and keep track, keep in touch with the government and so on.
When you say large company, we're talking about what kind of company?
obligated party,
What's that?
like an obligated party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
fuel company.
Okay.
And I wasn't sure what your question
No, I'm
was.
just, we're talking about all
Okay.
sorts of hypotheticals. I'm
Yeah.
trying to be clear.
Okay, and anyone subject to these this procedure. I think a large company would probably, add someone to their payroll or just take someone in-house, reassign them, and you'd have someone taking care of all this. I wonder about the mom and pop.
Just, the mom and top would be the ones that would be going, wow, we don't have to do anything. We could just simply pay a fee to have it done. Whereas the large companies would say, we could have a new subsection of our business that weatherizes and earns money. It's the smaller dealers that have a choice that's more meaningful here.
Yeah.
They don't have to do it. They could just pay the going rate.
And with money they got from where?
Same place the others did.
Got it from the customers.
Yeah, from selling fuel. From selling fuel that pollutes.
I know that, I mean, that's,
Yeah, where else would you suggest we might get the money?
I mean, you got carrots and sticks for anything. It seems to me, when again, I talk about the complication here. We could simply bite the bullet, face the music, and have a carbon tax.
We're not doing that.
That's the stick, and then we have, the carrot is, hey, we'll help you get off of that altogether. It's up to you, you can spend a lot less, just stop polluting the air. I mean, why, instead of we got this big convoluted, I'm not gonna say convoluted, that's an insult, I'm sorry. But but you will agree complicated. It's complicated.
Well, it actually simplifies it for like mom and pops who don't have to go out and do the weatherization. They could just pay a credit and someone else will find someone to go out and do the work and be paid for credits. They don't have to make phone calls. They don't have to call someone up. They don't have to inspect the work. They don't have to sell it. It gets done by the system without mom and pop having to worry about it.
Just one other thing I'd add, thanks, everybody. The other thing I'd add is, if a Vermont fuel dealer goes to a Vermont wholesaler, the wholesaler already has the obligation because they imported the fuel. So if you're a retailer and you're buying from an in-state wholesaler, there's no impact on you whatsoever.
Yes, so if you remember Global Partners who came in yesterday, who talked to us, that was the in-state example.
Listen, before we go on, just for the record, I did say the dirty word carbon tax out loud. I'm very clear, and I always have been, I only support a carbon tax if it is structured in such a way that no one has to pay it.
Oh,
Okay?
Maybe someday in the
That
future,
it's packaged with, here, we're gonna help you get your fuel pumps in, your heat pumps in.
Someone will discuss carbon taxes over a beer somewhere, but
Okay.
this bill doesn't do that.
So thanks for that clarification. Let's keep reading.
I'm not sure it's clarification, I was asking for a clarification.
Okay.
And well, I think your point that underlines it, that I feel like we're talking quite a lot about, is how will it impact individual customers? And we can talk about that. We've spent a lot of time on that, but you and I can talk about that one-on-one too.
What's different about this than some other proposals to address greenhouse gas emissions is that the credits end up supporting work, and it's a whole suite of different programs. It's not it's not just a revenue stream. It's a credit system, or you want to call it a revenue stream, but it supports actions in that whole list of 12, 11 measures that were the initial set of measures. So it could be weatherization, it could be deployment of heat pumps, it could be heat pump hot water heaters, etc., or biofuels.
So on page 14, there are a few changes. So first, subdivision 3 has been struck, which previously gave the commission authority to set the definition of customers with low income and moderate income.
So I thought Senator McDonald had a useful suggestion about that one, that we've established it, but maybe it's, would be helpful to specify that the PUC could review those definitions and make recommendations to the legislature.
Are you suggesting here in this language, or would you perhaps want it to be in their annual report?
I think that would be a better place to do it, since they're reporting on some other things. So the strike stays. Thank you.
Small change on line 9. The commission shall consider front-loading credit requirements for customers with low income and moderate income, so that the greatest proportion of credits meets them in the earlier years. And then on line 13, this is again like for some clarity, but also clarifying intent. With consideration to how to best serve customers with low income and moderate income. The commission shall have authority to change the percentages established in subdivision 2, which is the 16% and 16%, and the criteria used to define customer with low income and moderate income for good cause after notice and opportunity for public process. Okay, so I missed this reference to establishing, so we're gonna strike that. But I did just want to check because you had discussion about this language on Friday. So with consideration to how to best serve customers, that work?
Thank you. I mean, I think it makes sense given that it's more, it more clearly matches the intent. So Watson?
Yep, so I'm jumping a little bit ahead here, but on line 17, I think it was suggested by Morcons that we add and discussion with the Clean Heat Standard Equity Advisory Group. So that if they're gonna make a change,
Okay.
that they've got to talk about it with the equity advisory group.
So are we on page 14?
14 and sub.
Reassigning apparently to the PUC the ability to, at their discretion, change the definition of low and moderate income people. So what we're
Say
doing
that
here?
one more time.
Or with consideration to the best serve the customers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which of course every word in this entire document is with consideration of how to best serve customers. Are we authorizing the commission to decide who is low and moderate income?
Well, that's, sorry,
In spite of the previous discussions we've had about it, yeah.
yes, I apologize. If that is your intent, this language on line 16 should be struck. So I'm sorry I missed that.
Oh, no, don't
Yeah.
apologize.
Um,
Thank you for helping us understand what it does.
So I'm flagging that for next pass through. We'll have that.
Oh, yes, but adding the equity,
And the equity advisory group, yes, please. I think we'd added that, discussed it, but
Mr. Chair,
yes,
just a
please.
few moments ago, we were discussing about what changes that the PUC suggested they should be made in their annual report. Would anything prohibit the PUC from letting us know a change that they think is appropriate and not waiting until the annual report? If not waiting till the annual report would bring it to our attention sooner with greater options for addressing any such concern.
Speculative on my part, but they don't seem to be shy about speaking to us when they, so.
Well, I wouldn't want us sitting here saying, well, you didn't bring that up and you didn't put that in the annual report. And until you do, we're not looking at it. Not that we would do anything like that. Just, I don't want to prohibit the PUC from bringing things to us in a timely fashion.
Okay. So maybe you can address that at the,
Would you like it to just be in the statutory section?
Or wherever you refer to bringing things to the legislature, the timely report, give an option to bring it in their annual report, to bring it to us sooner if they believe it to, that would be helpful to policy development.
okay. And feel free to weave that in wherever you think it fits best. Maybe it's here, maybe it's later on, like the annual report later. Okay.
Okay, so the next change is on page 15.
Chairman.
Yes.
I just want to, thank you, I just want to flag number 7 here, that we've established what low and moderate income is defined as.
Oh, yeah.
And so I wonder if number 7 is unnecessary.
So I think the original intent of this language was to have a very bright line backup
Oh, this is the backup.
for like, especially for early action credits.
Okay.
However, I think you're raising a fair point.
Could it be confusing somehow? I'm willing to be wrong, I just.
If you want to strike it, I think you can, but I guess the question is if there would be any programs that do not align with your definitions in a way that it would be, that they would be more inclusive than your definitions.
Don't mind being more inclusive. I'm happy to just
Well, how
leave
about,
it in.
so how about, let's flag it and follow up with council outside and we,
Because if it was less inclusive, I think it would be
Right, that'd be
high.
bad. This is more inclusive.
Yeah, so, but yeah, we can think about it.
Thank you.
and so on our schedule, I don't know if we lose you at 9:45, but
No, not until, well, so 10:30 is when I'm supposed to be down the hall.
yes. So let me check. Mr. Fowler, you were scheduled originally, I thought we might be further along at this point, so your testimony would come up now. Are you, would your schedule allow for you to have us continue to work while we have access to council?
Really, I still have 15 minutes.
So
I
I,
still have 15 minutes.
oh, sure,
Yes,
you still have
I'm
that
happy.
same amount of
I'm
time,
happy to
but I
listen.
think we'd be starting closer to 1 hour from now.
That would be fine with me, if that's okay.
Roughly 45 minutes from now, we'll pause and take a break, and then we'll go right after that. But we lose our lawyer for the balance of the morning, so while we have her, it'll be great.
Thank you for asking me.
Okay, thanks for your courtesy. All right, so while you're still available, let's keep reading on. Thank you.
All right, on page 15, line 12, so there's a few changes here from the default delivery agent that came from the PUC. So the commission shall designate the default delivery agent. The default delivery agent shall be one or more statewide utilities, statewide entities.
Please, where is our lady?
She went to the restaurant.
Okay, Senator McDonald, as clerk, please steer the ship.
The default delivery agent shall be one or more statewide entities capable of providing a variety of clean heat measures. And then the language is struck on line 15 that would allow it to be a market participant, which relates to this language we talked about earlier, which is allowing it to not be a market participant, but to be an entity wholly regulated by the PUC. Okay. So the next change is on page 17. So on page 17, we're now, these are the sections on enforcement. So small changes that were proposed by the PUC in their consultation with the Attorney General's office. So down on line 17, on page 17, false or misleading statements or other representations made to the commission by obligated parties related to compliance with the Clean Heat Standard are subject to the commission's enforcement authority, including the power to investigate, assess penalties, and assess penalties under this title. So just specifying that only false and misleading statements are actionable.
Sorry for the interruption. Thank you. I'll catch back up there.
Yes.
Boy, these are fast when I'm out of the room. There's must be a message here.
So the
These fines or, we might be nice to actually see those, because someone, clever person may choose to move to send it to judiciary to have this flushed out, so. Can we see them at least first?
you want me to add them in the text, or you just want to?
Show us, give us a copy of what the fines and all those things are, and then decide what to do.
Sure, so the cap currently in statute for the PUC to assess fines is a single instance of a violation is $42,000. It might be $42,500. And an ongoing violation is capped at $175,000. And so I can get you the details of that, maybe not at this moment, but I can.
Maybe not at this moment.
Yes.
So we can say we've seen it. And do something or not do something. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. You'd like to see what's referenced here in 9 VSA chapter 63? Is that, I'm sorry.
No, we're not quite there. It was still the PUC's penalty authority, which is just their Title 30 penalty authority. So we're at the bottom of page 17.
Okay, so we'll, if you could pull that information and send it to Ms. Newman and the committee, that way we can post it and circulate it. Senator Watson?
My apologies, I just want to check, so we're at the bottom of page 17,
Yes.
which is,
Enforcement authority. So this was a small change requested by the PUC in consultation with the Attorney General's office.
I think, oh, okay, so I have a suggestion that's a little bit back, I apologize, I have to go back there. So I'm back after, on page 16, under number 1, at the end of number 1, because I believe this section is about designated default delivery agent.
Yes.
I would like to suggest language at the end of that paragraph that would say the designated default delivery agent will develop and offer programs that benefit manufactured homes, multifamily buildings, condo associations, and renters who pay their own heating bills. I can send that.
Oh,
I don't know if I did send you that.
you did.
I did send you that.
Yes, and I was having a hard time thinking where to put it.
Oh, I thought just, but if we're gonna establish them, we'll be like, we're gonna establish them and then you gotta do that. But if it needs its own section.
No, yes, I think So I will just say that if you're moving towards these significant changes on the default delivery agent, I was considering giving them their own statute because like the opt-out provision and the way they are appointed should maybe be in one spot instead of these two separate sections. So I do think that's something to consider. And so I was overall thinking about how to reformat this mail based on these big changes. But yes, sorry. So
So thank you for that. I think that's a good, a good consideration to make more explicit. And we are going to get language from sort of affected parties and obligated parties as well. So I think let's see that suggested language, and then, because if we're doing a rewrite, as you suggest, to reorganize that stuff and put it towards our section, then let's try to do both sets of edits at the same time. So I'm flagging it. We can come back to that. Thank you.
If I can continue under, under 2, that starts an obligated party, the PUC had suggested changing the may to a shall and then adding language that was like, unless the commission has approved an application by the obligated party, self-administer, blah, blah, blah.
yes, well, so I wasn't sure where you all were gonna land on
Right.
this.
Well, and so I will just say that, again, I know we're gonna revisit this idea.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to flag that it's worth revisiting. It's whether or not it's, regardless of the tradability of the credits, making them more of an opt-out rather than an opt-in. Is, again, it's still interesting to me. Yeah. And this has to do with that language.
You are looking at
Number
2, so lines 5 through 8, that section.
Yes.
Right there.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Right, let's continue.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk about the language on the bottom of page 17, or are you guys kind of?
We're all set. This is just, my understanding was that this suggestion came from the Attorney General's office and it narrowed the scope a little bit. What kind of statement?
Okay, and so on page 18, there is related language. So again, the PUC and the AG's office consulted on this enforcement language. So on line 4, failure to register with the commission as required by this section is a violation of the Consumer Protection Act in 9 VSA Chapter 63. So it's cutting it down slightly, but this is something that AG's office was interested in doing, eliminating extraneous phrases that they don't normally use, like per se violation, or making references to the defense, which they do not normally do either.
And so a prohibition of unfair and deceptive act is part of 9 VSA 63.
Yes, although I think they use a slightly different phrase also, so it's just the Consumer Protection Act's language.
So we're basically harmonizing with the commission.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you check mark that down? Okay, thank you.
Okay, small change on page 19. This was a style suggestion that I made yesterday, or on Friday, so on or before January 15th of each year following the year in which the rules are first adopted under this chapter instead of section, because there may be other rules adopted under this chapter.
Thank you.
So I didn't make any changes to the tradable clean heat credit section that starts on page 19. Based on your conversations yesterday. So there is additional language that was proposed by the PUC that you could look at here. It's not in this draft currently. So that is sort of part of the discussion you all would need to have.
Great, thank you. And based on our preliminary informal discussion, it seems as though a majority of the committee that had already considered it did not want to go there. So rather than ask me to take it out, put it back in, we just left it and we'll flag it because it's part of that bigger discussion.
But there is a small change on page 20 that came from some of your testimony last week. So it's the first line of page 20, but the language starts on page 19. So credit values. Clean heat credit shall be based on the accurate and verifiable life cycle CO2e emission reductions in Vermont's thermal sector that result from the delivery of eligible clean heat measures to new or existing end-use customer locations into or in Vermont.
No point in waiting a day for something to be existing to then go ahead and apply measures to it. That would be more expensive the day after than before you build it.
So there are not any changes on the next page. There is a
Oh, no, thank you, Chair, right. I'm wondering when we are gonna be talking about the eligible measures, if we could talk a little bit about an addition around manufactured homes or mobile home replacement. But that also comes into the question generally about this section, which is the shall versus the may. And is the list expansive or not expansive?
Thanks.
So that's
We did have a conversation about that.
a few different points under that. I'm also happy with the section as is.
I think if I were to say anything based on yesterday's conversation about shall versus may on line 15 of page 20, would be that if we're going to provide a list, that there's no point in providing a list if it's only a may.
And
That was part of your point yesterday, right?
yes, so then I would, Senator Watson, I had a conversation outside of the room around including mobile home replacement. So if you're familiar with the Vermods, which are a manufactured home replacement, could that be considered an eligible choice underneath this? And I think it is, implicit in kind of number one, but we wanted to clarify it, or at least that was what I took from how we discussed it.
Can you say a little more? I mean, there's a trailer park in Virginia that they took out all the old ones and replaced it with Vermont. So I'm familiar with the concept, but I'm just wondering sort of how you're, if you could say a little more about weaving it into treating it as an eligible measure.
So I do have some suggested language for that. So it would be number 11, high efficiency modular homes as replacements for non-high efficiency manufactured homes, to make it clear that it's not just that we're just gonna give you a home, but it's the idea is that it is a clean heat measure if it is a replacement for an inefficient mobile home. And
The marginal increase from going from regular to
yes,
energy efficient.
yes, and I actually have been in touch with Laura Collins about this particular item, and VHFA sent me data about how much more efficient they are, and that, so it seems clear to me that it would constitute carbon reduction emissions, and so therefore should be called out. And I guess the VHFA does have a mobile home replacement project program, and so this could theoretically dovetail with that program.
So if you have language, if you could get it to council, then we can.
Did I send you
I can't remember.
that? I will send it to you.
Okay.
And
Are there standards for new mobile homes?
Well, they'd have to follow residential building code if that's what you're.
So I mean, one of the criticisms of mobile homes is that the heating and stuff, pipes go underneath the mobile home.
exactly.
And they freeze, so we're not replacing something.
Great point. I think that that's the whole goal with the modular replacement. Although we haven't talked through, there actually is, I was meaning to bring this up when we had Mr. Coda in the chair, but there is weatherization skirting you can put in mobile homes that is that resolves the majority of the issue we highlighted, but
Right, well, I think as I understand, the rolling weatherization program has made improvements to many mobile homes. So they must have worked it out. If we, right, besides the language, yeah, I'll get in touch with Ms. Collins and see if she can provide a little more testimony so we know, better understand the connection. So write that on our need a little more testimony list. Thank you. All right, thank you, Senator Watson. Anything else in this section? Yeah.
Well, there's a small change on page 22. On line 9. So for purposes of this section, the carbon intensity values shall be understood relative to number 2 fuel oil delivered into or in Vermont in 2023, having a carbon intensity value of 100.
Senator Watson.
I just want to go back to page 21, section E1A, having a standard separate 2025, and what was I thinking around, like, do you want to change it to 2026? Because that is conceived to be the first year of the program.
We had a discussion about that and a little bit, and I don't think we resolved it.
My only thought is that on the next page, the PUC is required on line 6 to adopt the step down decrease
Okay.
on or before January 1, 2025, for the period between 2025 and 2030, and so 2030. And so I know I sort of flagged this concern, but it is at least partially covered, but I wasn't sure if you.
So that is actually very helpful, and that's a reason to do it. So I'm happy. Thank you.
Okay.
And so the fuel oil benchmark is set for 2023. Never competing fuel. We'll get up to this year. You don't have to find an archived sample. I know most of you probably do. All right.
So there are very few changes left.
Sorry, there's so much to say. Okay, under F1, I believe Richard Cowart had some suggested language that struck, page 19. Oh, no, I'm sorry, no, I mean, page 22, page 22, F1, it struck the section biofuels, electricity, and any other fuels used by clean heat measure, and it had some
Right.
alternative
Yeah.
language, which said, and any fuel that is used in a clean heat measure, including electricity or is itself a clean heat measure, including biofuels.
Which we've said are subject to accounting verification measures by experts elsewhere in the government.
Just want
Thank
to
you.
flag that is one that I would,
I think we talked about it, we presented it, we didn't, as a committee at that point, since we weren't editing, give it a thumbs up, thumbs down. My take is that anything that's more clear and precise is a step in the right direction.
So I didn't watch this testimony, so what is this language doing?
Well, I could read it.
So you're in, I think you're on line 15, so heating fuels, biofuels, electricity.
Yep.
So what is this language doing?
remember what.
Yeah, the argument for it was, so including electricity, or is itself a clean heat measure, including biofuels? So I think in part that by breaking out, including electricity, your was acknowledging that there's a carbon footprint for the electric component of a measure, but Senator Watson.
I think it also had to do with, because it had the phrase, any other fuel used by a clean heat measure, sort of kind of implied that a fuel could not also be a clean heat measure.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe it's worth reviewing.
So let me. thank you for
Yes,
flagging it.
yeah, we can come back.
I'll, rather than
Yep.
try to recollect on
Yeah,
the
thanks.
fly, I'll just slow down and double check the testimony and make sure we all understand it completely before we make that edit. But thanks for flagging the spot, yes, that was part of his testimony.
And I have an addition I'd like to add. I assume your next thing that you were gonna talk about would be page 24. So I have something for the end of the paragraph. Page 23, line 6, just to add it to the end of 2. This is from Pete Carley. And including greenhouse gas emissions from land use change, including deforestation, loss of, including sequestration of carbon.
So you're on page 23, line 6.
Yes, just adding it to the end of that sentence.
Can you
Wait.
repeat that again?
Sure, yes. So it would add, and including greenhouse gas emissions from land use change, including deforestation, including loss sequestration of carbon.
The end where,
To the.
Mr. Chair.
Can I make a suggestion? Could you give it to council, show us sort of how it fits in? Thank you. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I remember, I think it was Stephen who had brought this to us. So on line 13, on page 23, we have review of consequences, which may include deforestation, conversion of grasslands, or creation of new methane to meet fuel demand. So you're adding, your thought is to add sequestration in that section or to put it in a different section?
No, so section 2 is, I see is about carbon. Like above there, the top, that top area. G is about, in my mind, non-carbon things. And so I'm suggesting that we add it to 2 because these have carbon impacts rather than non-carbon impacts. Captured.
So is the thought that you're concerned that sub 2 might be read in such a way as not to assess the impacts of
Lost, like
deforestation or something?
particularly of sequestered carbon.
So if you can, sorry, I just help, it would be helpful if you can give that.
Yes.
If we take a writing and
Yes.
situ, then I think it'll be easier for all of us to slow down and make our way through it. But- So, just the right new language from you. Okay, thank you. Back to council.
Oh, I have more, I'm sorry. These are some of the ones,
Okay,
apologize. In G, still on page 23, I would like to, so line 10, review consequences, it says, the commission shall periodically assess. And I would like to be more clear about how often that assessment will happen. And so I was thinking that an assessment every other year would probably be sufficient, so biannually, not semi-annually, would be sufficient. Or if people wanted to suggest every 3 years, something like that, that'd be fine. I just want to make it clear, I want to make this a little bit tighter. Like, how are we assessing?
right, there's no interval established, so.
Yeah.
um,
And one other change in this paragraph.
So instead of periodically, you're suggesting biannually
Yes.
or biannually or biennially? But an editor will have to sort that out. The thought was every other year.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
you get the right word for every other year.
And then in line 13, instead of such consequences may include deforestation, I would like it to say shall include deforestation, etc. And then I would like to add one thing to the list, which would be damage to watersheds.
On the only thing we're going to shall, I think is what if it turns out in that assessment there is no deforestation, so.
Which that would be fine. They should assess that. If there is no deforestation, great, they should tell us that.
That's the assessment.
Okay, so. I'm fine with the idea. I'm not sure that the Shea Mountain may shall thing works out quite. The shall is what it gets assessed. The way it's expressed that it shall be. So let's look at it once we have it.
Shall assess doesn't prejudice what the assessment should be. It's just requires the assessment.
It's so the that shell is already there. This is what,
Shall.
yeah, what the assessment includes.
Consistent. Also, the loss of carbon sink is one of the issues that various citizens have raised on the look at.
So, thank you. Good to go.
I think so.
Biennially means every other year.
Biennial.
Biannually is twice a year.
Oh,
That's semi-annual.
Semi-annually also means twice a year, but
I did not know that.
I just Googled it,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
I will consult with the editors. but
Stand corrected.
How about every 2 years?
Rotate.
I'm not writing that many words.
Okay. Onward.
The full moon.
Page 24, small change. This was in draft 2.1, but we didn't discuss it. So this was recommended by the PUC in their prior draft. So credit eligibility. All eligible clean heat measures that are delivered in Vermont starting in January 2023 shall be eligible for credits and may be retired and count towards the emission reduction obligations, regardless of who creates or delivers them, and regardless of whether their creation or delivery was required or funded in whole or in part by other federal or state policies and programs. They
So what?
did make up another proposal here, I
Yes.
think it's here, that I have not included, but they included language about double counting.
That was what I was gonna bring up. I'm interested in that. I don't know if other people are. Just wanted to express that.
Okay, so why don't, that's hard to see something not here. So where was their insertion, if you could just, we'll flag it for further discussion rather than sort that issue right now. What line, where would it insert?
I think it's at the end of the paragraph, so line 11.
Okay. All right. So we'll come back to that. Thank you.
Small change on page 29, so we're jumping forward. On page 29, this is the section on the equity advisory group. So adding to the equity advisory group, the Vermont Housing Finance Agency.
Any questions or concerns on that? You're gonna go to another page.
I'm sorry.
Let's go back. What page?
Okay, I think this is on. It is on page 27. So these are, gosh, okay, sorry. Getting embarrassed here. Jumping back and forth, you know? Okay. So I guess I would put this on line 3 of 27. So just to clarify, so this is like a membership of the tag. So I would just add, including land use changes and deforestation.
As expertise someone should have.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that I think there's gonna be a fair amount of work that will be mathematical and not sort of land impact oriented. And I'm just trying to make sure that we're not assigning someone to be there to discuss land use, when they may be spending a serious amount of time on carbon impact calculations and developing the schedule. They can consult with anyone, but so your point is you don't want them to just have the ability to consult, you want someone present, named to the tag itself.
Yes. Though, happy to have more. I feel a little bad saying like, oh, I can discuss this more later because I feel like we've got a lot of things to discuss later. So maybe this was,
Sure, so where would do you have precise language to offer? That's always helpful.
yep, so just add like at the end of the words, so line 3 ends with environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say including. So
So I can read it if you, so it starts on page 26 with, they're gonna appoint members who have expertise in one or more of the following areas. And so I don't think there will necessarily be like a designated land use person potentially, but people who have that skill can apply.
Sure.
And so then it is technical and analytical expertise in measuring life cycle greenhouse gas emissions, energy modeling and data analysis, clean heat measures and energy technologies, sustainability and non-greenhouse gas emission strategies designed to reduce and avoid impacts to the environment, delivery of heating fuels, land use changes and deforestation, and climate change mitigation law and policy.
I was actually thinking we could just, so where it says avoid impacts to the environment, I was thinking including land use changes.
Oh, including
So
there.
that it's kind of like a subset of avoiding impacts to the environment.
Okay.
So just clarify.
Use changes.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Do you have anything prior to the VHFA insertion on 20 hours?
I don't think so. I do. Sorry. Okay. Under, gosh, this would be line. Okay, so line 13, so just prior to that,
Sorry, what page are we on?
oh, I'm sorry, it's 29. Right now, renters and rental property owners are together. I think it'd be worth separating them out.
I see.
No, so who we want on the equity advisory group? We should have some that are renters, some that are rental property owners, lumping them together. Right, their interests are not necessarily the same, so separating them out, and then I think that might make it, I don't know if we're at like 11, like 10 members or 11 or 12 at this point. That's,
Okay, so we're right, renters and landlords don't necessarily mean the same, so that's a switch, and then we need to chance the count. Thank you.
for what is worth, no more.
Okay, okay, this is where we'll get a clean copy and there'll be a chance, there's some things we can put off. And the other thing is, it'll be easier when we read the next draft, reconsider our flag notes, make a nice clean copy. All right, so I'm looking ahead, the next change looks like page 32. And you need to leave in 3 minutes, so we're gonna have to pause, park it prior to finishing, but that's okay. Yeah. I don't know if there's much controversy in this section.
So on page 32, this is the language that the PUC went over yesterday, changing the public engagement process language. That they will use before the rule is published. So the rules are published. So there's new language on line 7 on page 32. The commission shall allow any person to register at any time in the commission's online case management system, EPUC, as a participant in the Clean Heat Standard proceeding. All members of the equity advisory group shall be made automatic participants to that proceeding. All registered participants in the proceeding, including all members of the equity advisory group, shall receive all notices of public meetings and all notices of opportunities to comment on in the proceeding.
The thing I would flag is pulling the equity advisory group forward to be part of the discussion or fear. I think it was the intention of the PUC to do that, but it's explosion.
So next on line 14, the commission shall hold at least 6 public hearings or workshops that shall be recorded and publicly posted on the commission's website or on EPUC. These meetings shall be open to everyone, including all stakeholders, members of the public, and all potentially affected parties.
Yeah, I guess.
Any questions, comments? 33, well, 33 is gonna be like,
Right, so a lot of the language on page 33 has been struck. This was on the different types of meetings the PUC shall hold. So that has been struck. But there's new language down on like 15. The commission shall also provide at least 3 opportunities for the submission of written comments. Any person may submit written comments to the commission. This language feels a little redundant to me because it does say on the prior page that public comments can be submitted at any time, but I think they said in their testimony yesterday that they are intending to have multiple drafts of the rules for review. So that is sort of what's captured there. The commission shall seek input from the equity advisory group on organizations and communities to invite to participate in the commission's public meetings and opportunities to comment.
Thank you, Chair Bray. So it's my understanding that Director Susanna Davis will be joining us later in the week
yes,
to
you
give
couldn't come in
testimony.
yesterday, so.
Yeah. And so my question is, I really would love to know her and her office's take on this section in particular and kind of the public outreach. I worry with our timing of the vote on Friday that if there were recommended changes that she's going to bring to us, it might be a tight change. So could we ask her to, or maybe you've already done this and you're,
we-
ahead of
We
the
asked them
curve.
to come in as soon as possible last week, but as soon as possible turned out to be a week. And so they have no language. I'll make sure, actually, I think what we'll do is send this when we have our next clean draft. So I just let me pause and ask, we've made a number of changes today. Do you know when we would see the next draft? Sorry.
Potentially tomorrow. Am I coming in here tomorrow?
Yes.
Yes. So I guess you can have them tomorrow.
Okay, so then I think probably because of these revisions, exactly at the point. If you could
Yep.
send over to their office, they've seen earlier language, but not this language. So yeah, I take your point, it's awkward. We asked them when they were unavailable for a week. So, and of course, if it turns out that substantive changes are recommended and we don't have time, then we will roll the vote over till next Tuesday. We have to. It'd be great if we finish this week, but if we get a late change and we need more time, we'll slow down and need the time. Thank you.
Small change on line, oh, I have to go. Small change on line 16 on page 35. All right, I'll just finish because these are actually very simple. So this was a suggestion that the committee discussed last week. So the subsection J now reads, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, the Department of Public Service, and other state agencies and departments shall assist the commission with economic modeling for the required reports and rulemaking process.
I think it used to say they have access to them, so now we're saying they shall assist. So,
No, well, the language that's struck is on line 16. I'm including the strikeouts.
oh, maybe like,
Yeah.
thanks.
So at the bottom of page 36, all of section 8 has been struck.
So, I talked to Secretary Moore, and with the change in data that they're getting, they don't feel like they need to have this was a holdover from a year ago, and at that point, the data flow requirement from tax over A&R had been spelled out. So the proportionality or sectoral proportionality report was their way of addressing who's contributing how much. Now they feel like they're gonna have that data directly, they don't need to have a report.
So the language that was in section 8 is not in the bill because just having it be a 40-page bill seemed sad to me. So I did delete it, but the language in section 8 would have required a sectoral proportionality report. So it's in the prior draft if you want to see it. And then on page 37 is the title change that was requested.
If people want, so two things, so thank you very much for staying, thank you for being flexible on schedule, and thank you to everyone in the committee for bearing down and getting right way through. I, for the things we flagged for further discussion, if it's new language, if you have to council so we can see it in a form that's ready for insertion, if that's where we're going. Thank you. That would be great. Other things I think were questions. So for instance, the Vermont units and over the talent. So with that, I appreciate that we've been glued to our seats for 2 hours, 5 minutes, which is